Good morning, everyone. I'm Caroline McGilvery, and I'm an MBA student at MIT Sloan. It is my pleasure to introduce our panel, The Fan Attention Game, How Sports and Data Build Fandom, presented by the Wasserman Foundation. Our panelists today are Kat Frederick, Chief Marketing Officer of the Los Angeles Rams, Tim Clark, Chief Brand Officer of NASCAR, and Shelley Pissarra, EVP of Consumer Insights at Wasserman. And our panel today will be moderated by Valerie Camillo from Hershend Family Entertainment. This panel will run for 40 minutes, and we'll leave 5 minutes at the end for questions. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Valerie.
Thank you, Caroline. Good morning, everybody. All right, let's jump right in. Fan engagement. So maybe we'll start with a quick hitter. Kat, we'll start at the end with you. How engaged on a scale of 1 to 10 do you feel Rams fans are right now? And what is one thing that you think you can do to drive that number higher?
Whew, that's a great question. I would say there's a lot going on in the world right now. And the confetti has just fallen on Super Bowl, so we're probably at a 4 as free agency picks up and we turn the corner into the draft. That's when our Rams fans will start cooking. So second half of the question, what's one thing that...
What's one thing you're focused on to really sort of drive fan engagement higher? I mean, you are in the off season.
Yeah.
What is there a tentpole event? Is there...
I mean, the next thing up for us that will be pretty meaningful will be draft. As an enterprise, we enjoy being defiantly original, and so we created a franchise where we have the Draft House, which gives us a bespoke moment to create content and create engagement, to invite creators, and really to think about the draft as a entire brand moment.
What's your first round pick? What number?
We are right now 23, 26.
Harder to create engagement, like the pick.
Well, given that last year was the first time in Sean McVay's entire head coaching tenure that he had a first round pick, the fact that we have one this year is a complete luxury. And knowing Les Snead, if any of you guys researched his GM style, everything is on the table. So as a marketer, hold on to my butt.
Yeah. Excellent. Tim, how are you doing this morning? Tell me about fan engagement around NASCAR. How would you rate it right now, and what are you focused on in the next, say, 3 to 6 months to really drive that higher?
Yeah, I'm going to go pretty high. We're 3 weeks out from the Daytona 500, which is obviously our biggest race of the year and one of the biggest sporting events in the U.S. I'm going to give it an 8.5, just to be very specific. But I think 8.63. I think we had a really good start to the season. We've got a new slate of broadcast partners, so obviously there's some additional focus and attention from some media properties, which is great. For us, I think next 3 to 6 months, we talk a lot about diversity of our schedule. We're not an inherently transportable sport. In a way, it's you can go abroad for a football game or a soccer game or whatever the case may be, and you've got a pitch and a field and a ball and put human beings on a plane. For us, it's a little bit difficult to do that. There are only so many places that are built and designed to host NASCAR races in the U.S. and certainly abroad. So diversity for schedule for us over the next 6 months, we will have a race in downtown Chicago, in the streets of Chicago around Grant Park, and then we'll go to Mexico City, all within a 35-day period. So I think the thesis for us is we can ask fans to come to us, or we can have enough confidence in our product to take it to them. And I think we're really starting to stretch our legs a little bit on the latter.
Excellent. So Shelley, I'm going to use you as a representative. You work with all of the different leagues through Wasserman, and you see a ton of data, you see a ton of trends and strategies. So as you think about the bucket of leagues out there, which one do you feel has the highest fan engagement right now, and why? And I'm going to take the NFL off the table because I think that's always a little bit of an outlier, just coming off the Super Bowl as well.
Yeah, you just end up in a numbers game there. I'd say right now, take the last 4 weeks, 5 weeks, the NHL. The NHL has lightning in a bottle with what happened with Four Nations. And I don't even know that they really knew it was going to turn out to be as successful as it was. Highest viewership, I believe, ever. And during a time when, call it supplementary, complementary, adjacent events like Pro Bowl, like All-Star, things like that had mixed reviews, mixed engagement. They're still figuring out the exact format.
Yep.
And in this particular case, the format of the Four Nations tournament turned out to be one that is super true to the sport, super true to the game, and honestly became, during a somewhat turbulent time in global politics, and especially between the US and Canada, we'll leave that there and not talk about that anymore, but that brought even more kind of hometown sentiment to the game. So you add another layer of passion to the event itself, and the engagement has just been off the charts. Social engagement afterwards, we haven't seen kind of the full follow-on tune-in to games afterwards, but just in the work that we do with them, talking about how do we make sure we take advantage of scheduling? How do we make sure that we pull through and are paying attention with all of our partners, and really looking at kind of running this last half of the season going into the playoffs, whereas typically they see their best viewership during the playoffs and their highest engagement there. Now they have this great moment in the middle, and then how do you just almost throw out the regular playbook and say, what do we do with this? This is a whole new group of fans and even avid fans that are engaging with us in a way that they haven't in a long, long time, if ever.
It'll be interesting to see if it's repeatable, right?
Yeah,
Because it was
yeah.
such a zeitgeist moment between everything going on with the tariffs and the political leaders on both sides kind of sniping at each other, and if it was a different matchup, it would have potentially resulted in a different moment. So it'll be really interesting. I think they have a great strategic challenge to figure out how do we repeat this again and keep it going.
A really
great launch, unbelievable.
Unbelievable launch, and I think just a wonderful opportunity to bring the partners in and say, let's try and test some things. Let's really see what the power of moments like this and our brand as a league and your brand as a partner together can do in really engaging with a fan base that's very open, at this point to having other experiences. So fantastic timing.
Let's talk a little bit more about politics, to be honest, in the moment. So much of our share of life, when I talk to anyone, one of the only things they want to talk about, whether they love it or hate it, is the new administration and what's going on. And how, in this particular case, I think it worked to the advantage of the NHL, but in other cases, potentially it's diverting attention. And you see the ratings for non-sports related content go through the roof. During the first Trump administration, likely to happen again. How are you thinking about your properties maintaining the attention of your fans, the attention of the public, in a climate where there's a lot of other stuff going on and it's coming rapid fire?
I mean, I think for us, the fact that the schedule is not that intense, it is this 3-hour window of escapism. We have seen through engagement on digital and social, it continues to be a resource for escape, a place to go and deeply associate with your passion points and leave it there. And so I think for us, we try not to get involved in the conversation knowing that that is what people come to us for. And so that consumption has continued to stay pretty stable. But I do think that it's a lot of what we think about when we are running and operating a global business.
Do you as a brand shy away from sort of any alignment between your dialogue around what's going on with your team and trying to put it into the moment, especially if that moment might be political? Or
I mean, I think we take a very strong stance that as a club, we are nonpartisan, but there are certain values that are important to us, both as a brand and as an organization, and those are where we choose to lean in. I don't think that because a topic is available, it is necessarily a club's onus to lean in, unless it's something that you are actually, that we as an organization have conviction about.
what about social media? Would you give the latitude to your social media managers to make jokes about things that might be going on that
I
are
think
coming
that's
from your brand channels?
a little confusing and unhelpful, and I think for us it's about, inclusion and speaking on the topics in which we have power to speak.
How about for NASCAR? How are you navigating all of this?
This is a fascinating question for us at the moment because I think, listen, my guess is if we took a survey of this room, there are more non-NASCAR fans in this room than NASCAR fans. And I think I used to be a little bit maybe bashful about that. We kind of put ourselves up against other league properties. The stick and ball sports as we refer to them. And I think if you look at that as you think of the NHL and the NBA and Major League Baseball and NFL, and then you think of NASCAR as maybe a bit of an also-ran. But if you look at it comparatively with the numbers, that's not the case. So, Shelley talked about NHL, and they had a huge weekend. The number one event on television that weekend was the Daytona 500. The number two television event of that weekend was the rainfill at the start of the Daytona 500. So I think those metrics would surprise people of how big the sport is. But I would also say that, and I use this on all the time, we don't have a brand awareness problem. I would argue that most people have heard of NASCAR, but we may have a bit of a brand perception problem. And I think back to your point about politics, I think that's because there's an assumption of what NASCAR fans look like or how they lean politically or whatever the case may be. We are very much a red-blooded, blue-collar Americana brand. But I think we've got to differentiate the connotations that could bring. It doesn't always mean just the negative things that have somehow gotten connected to the American flag or patriotism or blue-collar or middle America. And I think the fact of the matter is there are sponsors, partners, stakeholders, whatever the case may be, that I think based on the results of the last election are kind of looking around going, we may have ignored this segment of the population and this group of people, and if we want to have an authentic connection with them, I think NASCAR might be the way to do that. So it is a big topic, I think, internally amongst our industry of how do you thread that needle? How do you tell that story without bringing in, I think, some of the negative perceptions or negative connotations that come with it?
So are there new fan segments, and this will really be a question for everyone, that you're tracking for NASCAR, and what do they look like, and how did you uncover them?
Yeah, I think the two segments in particular that are growing at the highest rate are Hispanics and females. And I think there are probably a million data-driven reasons that we could get into that's driving that. But I think the biggest part is that we've just really remained authentic and kind of opened the door to everyone. And again, not trying to be all things to all people, but offering something for everyone. We've got an incredible crop of young female drivers that will be a force to be reckoned with within the next 3 to 5 years. And that is huge for us. We've got a really talented Hispanic driver named Daniel Suarez, who is racing at the top of the series now and was in the playoffs winning races. All of these marketing tactics, levers that we can all try to pull are great, but if you have someone that people can look at the television or buy a ticket and say, that person looks like me and this is something I want to be a part of, I don't think there's any substitute for that.
Shelley, you see fan data from all the different leagues. What's an emerging segment that's surprised you, delighted you, that you're really seeing on the rise?
I think it's less so a segment and more a set of behaviors that kind of are spanning generations. It's those who are figuring out how to enjoy all of their passions, which in many cases looks like a convergence of music, sport, and entertainment. And they're figuring out, how do I fit this into my life? How do I fit this into my schedule? I can't go to everything, but I can engage digitally, socially, watch highlights. We're seeing a lot of young fans come in. They don't need to watch the whole 3 hours. We talked a bit about this last time. They don't need to watch the whole 3 hours. They may get enough of the game through highlights. And yet, when there is a big event or something that they can't attend, they're first in line, they'll pay for a premium experience, whatever that might be. It's just figuring out how we can meet them where they are and then give them the experience that they're looking for. So if you want to call it those that are choosing to take advantage of the offering in terms of whether it's, like I said, social, digital, or the in-fan experience or the in-venue experience, but that can span age groups. So it's not to say it's just young folks who are digital natives. That's not it at all. If it's someone who is Gen X and has the chance to engage or catch those highlights, they're going to do it too. So it's more about the behaviors and having it fit into their lives.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about the sort of the highlight method of consumption, because predominantly what I did in sports was sell tickets to full-length events, and so as I've thought about, well, if all people are really consuming is the one big play, are they going to be as apt over time to buy tickets to a full game, or will their sort of scratch be able to be itched by just looking at these highlights? What do you think that it is a threat to full-length consumption, be it on a full television event, sitting down and watching the 2-3 hour game, and in partnership with that, going and attending a game or an event live, the sort of highlight culture to consumption?
I think if you're only looking at kind of the core group that you started with and looking at shifts in their behavior, sure, you might say that, because some of that's changing just due to time, kind of growth in life stage, things like that. But if you actually are looking at where fans are coming into the ecosystem and the fact that fan bases across the board continue to grow, interest in sport, in entertainment, in music's just growing, period. It's a matter of where can that time and attention come. So as long as you're still putting an amazing product on the field, on the pitch, on the court, you're in great shape for those who can do that and continue to sell tickets to the in-venue or watch it on broadcast. Where the opportunity lies is, again, figuring out how to go meet those folks that maybe haven't been as avid in the past or haven't engaged with you yet, and you start to bring them into the fold. Then how do I follow on with smart social content, potentially a one-to-one engagement with the right partner in hand, find something else they're interested in to surround them and bring them in even further. So not as much a threat, but as an opportunity to continue to grow the pool by figuring out those other points of engagement that might not just be that big traditional asset that we're all so used to, right? Which is the product itself in its only form.
Right.
Use it as a way to build that next ring out of opportunity and grow that fan base.
Is that how you're thinking about
I
it?
mean,
Kat?
I think the OKRs that we looked at 10 years ago are probably not the OKRs of tomorrow or today. Quite frankly, I got the question as I was prepping for another panel of like, how, are you distraught that people are snacking content on social? And I'm like, if we're living in a place where the brand has to be global in nature,
Yes.
the fact that the short-term objective cannot just be continue to fill the bowl, continue to put butts in seats, because we think about the different dimensions in which the brand needs to grow. If I have international marketing rights to Asia, Australia, and New Zealand, the thought that the conversion funnel is like, get them here,
Right.
yeah, that is absolutely a long-term objective. But fandom is built so differently these days with sports betting and with fantasy that if you have Justin Jefferson and Puka Nacua and Matthew Stafford on your team, you are consuming this bits and bytes no matter what. I mean, I'm sure there's some of you out there that are watching all of Sunday Ticket and Monday night and Thursday night, and we all do it, but the fact that you're zeroed in on who's gonna help you win this week, like that fundamentally changes the way engagement and consumption happens, and therefore as marketers, the evolution of that is the world and ecosystem of the micro engagements, and those snackable moments are part of the happy path to purchase, but no longer the clear and singular destination.
Yep. Yep.
So let's talk about capacity for a second. To my knowledge, the only league that's talking about creating more capacity is the NFL. And if you think about the NHL and Major League Baseball and basketball, there is a dialogue. I don't know how serious it is about reducing the number of events to increase engagement. I'm curious to the panel, do you think creating scarcity, which I think is what the NFL has, is a net benefit to fan engagement? And as you think about your own sport and you think about the other leagues that you're not participating in, what do you think, Shelley? I
think it can be, but I think you absolutely have to crush on all of the metrics that matter the most to your most avid fan group. And what I mean by that, the product has to be excellent, the experience has to be flawless, and that you have to understand your entry points and kind of the cost of entry. And that can be whether it's snackable content that is super authentic socially, digitally, something that you're paying for from an OTT perspective, but 100% it can do that because you have a limited window to get to it. It's like when a music tour comes through every 4 years, it's like, wait, I'm waiting up for this, I'm gonna save for this, depending on, again, the generation that you're in, but you have to deliver. And because one of the things that we want is that ongoing fandom, and you talk about maintaining that and continuing to grow that fan base, and we kind of expect more from the same set of criteria. In this particular case, then make sure you're firing on all cylinders, and it can be great, but you have to get that right.
Is NASCAR thinking about increasing their number of events, decrease the number of events, holding it steady?
Yeah, I think probably steady more than anything. I think for us, it's more about probably within each event, how to make it more palatable for a new fan. So a few years ago, we came up with the idea of stages, which is essentially quarters or halves. And the logic was, if you're a new fan and you tune in and at the top corner of your screen, you see lap 2 of 400, you may go,
Yeah.
wow, that is a lot.
I'll check back in a while.
But if you see lap 2 of 60 in stage 1, I could probably check that out. So I think there's different ways of bifurcating this and chopping it up. But I also think if you go back, and this is decades before my time at NASCAR, there's a bit of a cautionary tale where you were putting 200,000 people a weekend at some of these venues, and so you scaled these tracks up to host that number of people. And now the world has just changed, and you're between 60 and 70,000 attendees every weekend, which is a phenomenal number that most sports and most teams would kill to have, right?
That's a football stadium.
But when you put 60,000 in a venue that holds 200,000, the optics are terrible. So I think you just have to keep all of those things. You can't get too far out of step. The supply and demand, I think, no different than most other industries. I think sports has to keep track of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a football perspective, for a marketer producing that game, every game feels like the Super Bowl, particularly if you have not tried SoFi Stadium. Absolutely come see one of the modern marvels of the world. But I think there is a reality to the flip side of that is, okay, I'm guaranteed 10 home games.
Yeah.
Earn the right to play a few more, but that is a very limited set to then create an entire 365 narrative around. And so I think we have done as much as we can, both as a league and as a club, to create moments that matter to our fans across the way. And that's inclusive of the things that we do in the community as well, which for us is absolutely core to who we are.
What's so interesting to me about this conversation taking place at this moment is that the economics right now, there's so much pressure to actually increase the number of events because the local television money for some of the leagues has by and large disappeared. And so when I look at international expansion from some of the other leagues, I think there's a lot of drivers behind it, but two of the main ones are looking for new media dollars and looking for more event revenue. And so it's more events, not less.
And I think for us, it's globalization of the sport. As I said, there's Australian football, but there isn't the same appetite the way there is for cricket and rugby. But we know we can bring an opportunity to bring that passion to life in the NFL as well. And so I think we will play our very first game in Melbourne in 2026. We'll kick off the season there. And it's just a really exciting time because as we think about this global perspective, I personally want as much feedback and intel as I can around the globalization of the Rams fan and understanding what new opportunities, because we're constantly thinking about what do our fans want before they have to ask for it. So understanding how those trends and shifts are happening across the rest of global sports.
Right.
And it is not just the same stick and ball that we're comparing ourselves to, because I do feel like it becomes an echo chamber of tried and true.
Yeah.
So I've been working, the last few years for an amusement park company, and what I find interesting is they don't have like a game to engage fans around. So they have their properties, but one of the key ways they do it is through food and beverage and through retail. They like create. Many people in here are big Disney people, but there's like a whole thing about the popcorn buckets at Disney, for those of you that know. And I work for Dollywood Parks and Resorts. They have famous bread there called cinnamon bread, and when the rope drops and the park opens, people run to get the hot bread. Is there anything beyond the game itself or the event itself that is driving fan engagement around something that they might be able to experience on a game day, whether it's food or retail or some other unique activation that takes place around your property, or that you've seen, that you've admired through a brand that you work with?
I think it honestly is a lot of the kind of whatever has been built into that particular event, whether it's the way that the players are announced, or a pregame concert or a show or something that kind of enhances the experience. Yes, there'll be the local things that you're running for, or in college football, it might be the fifth quarter or something along those lines that you either have to stay for, have to experience. But kind of back to the question on scarcity, it is, what are those 4 or 5 things that make it so interesting that I have to go and experience this? This is something I just have to experience, whether it's legend, lore, or fact, or something new that's been added in terms of how the production comes together. But it's beyond kind of the core product that's on the field in those 3 hours. It's typically something in and around it that hopefully gets you closer to the athletes at the end of the day, or the entertainer, or whatever that might be. It seems to be the things that help you bridge that gap.
And is there one property or brand that's done something that you're like, damn, that was smart to engage fans?
I think AT&T has done an amazing job in how they show up to facilitate everything around WNBA All-Star. And they have been one of their cornerstone partners from day one. And they have done a great job of figuring out with the W what fan activation, fan engagement should look like. So then they end up, as a highly commoditized business, being a brand that gets a lot of credit for facilitating an experience you couldn't have had without them. They've done a great job in gaming as well, but saying, I need to be either facilitating gaming by having my super speed Wi-Fi going on here so that folks can participate alongside a particular gaming tournament, or I'm going to create an experience for a WNBA fan that would have never been able to be that close to a hero, if you will. Whether that's courtside appearances, games during halftime, meet and greets in and around, or just sponsoring, honestly, discussions, fan fests, things like that around the league. But those types of things create that type of love back for the brand too. So it helps the W draw fans closer, but honestly, it's really helping AT&T grow their love and affinity from being something you're probably not thinking a lot about unless you have a problem. But now they can get the credit for and help build their brand to have facilitated a great experience.
What's NASCAR doing that's real creative in this area?
So I think if any of you have ever been to a NASCAR race, the access is unparalleled. I think every time I've taken someone to a race for the first time, the pre-race, all of it, it's the sights and the sounds, and you see the cars and the drivers, and then you stand out on the grid and they're doing the national anthem and the flyover happens. And people start to get really uneasy. They're like, isn't the race about to start? I'm like, yeah, it'll start in about 5 minutes. They're like, well, we're standing by the car and the driver is standing right here. We should get out of the way. I'm like, no, this is kind of how it goes. The access it's unbelievable, down to one of the things that our fans have started doing at most races is they will all sign the start-finish line. So they'll get out pre-race and write their messages or names or whatever the case may be on the start-finish line. So you'll see photo finishes of races, and you'll see Sarah wrote her name right here in this photo that's now going to go global. So I think for us, it's the access. I think for other properties, and I just happened to see this week, the Indy 500 makes a moment every year out of unveiling their physical ticket. which I think is fantastic, right? And they still have digital ticketing, they still have all the technology, but to make a moment and a digital and social moment about unveiling the design on the physical ticket, which for a lot of maybe more traditional sports fans, that's like I still have a box of tickets of concerts or sporting events that I went to. So making that a moment and a bit of a unique one and a bit of a throwback, I think is really smart.
I mean, I think we have to leverage, as the Rams, the fortunate position we are in being the center of Hollywood, music, culture, fashion, and various other things. And so, you can come because we have a collaboration with One Piece. You can come because we are unveiling the Avatar premiere. You can come because there is 3 hours worth of football on the field as well, but you can also come because you're gonna get Naughty by Nature at halftime. I think for me, one of the things that has become a very special, albeit cheeky tradition, is we were the first stadium to include the integration of the digital camera kit with Snap. And so the first time folks were able to see us zoom in on, I think it was Christmas, Denver Broncos fans, and have the audacity to put crying faces on them, literally broke the internet that day. And we were like, sorry, not sorry. But those moments of levity where you're able to increase that sort of rival spirit in the building, in a different way than just scream and show your home field advantage, but to get people into the game. And that's also been an incredible way to get our partners into that moment of levity as well.
Yeah.
So, I know you're inundated with pitches on the next big thing in data and fan understanding and insights. Is there anything you've seen in the last year that you were like, that was impressive, and what was the capability and what was it going to unlock for your properties?
Oof. I'm happy to start. I'll go with Cosm.
Yeah.
And I think, listen, that's why I went first, because I knew someone was going to get to it. I think it's great for sports at scale, but I think specifically and selfishly for our sport, going to a race is, we feel really strongly about our ability to grab a fan if we can get them to come to the race. But that is a challenge, right? It can be tricky to get to a NASCAR race. So, whether it's augmented reality or whether it's physical spaces like Cosm, I think it can be a game changer of maybe the second best thing for some of these immersive experiences behind going to the venue. So I would lead with Cosm and I think others in the category.
I'll flip the other side. So much of game day, I think our fans expect that game day is purely catered to them. And in reality, so we actually have, our building is fully outfitted with Cosm cams. The way that we use them on game day is to ensure that Sean knows when to challenge, and for us to get the best viewing angles of, nope, I can show you, and when I zoom in with these Cosm cams that are insane, that the turf did come up, his foot's not on the line, challenge, overrule, right? So I think so much that I don't think fans understand is that game production is also to ensure that we continue to maintain that home field advantage and continue to give weapons, I should not say weapons, advantages to our football team.
Yeah. I think my answer would be the slow but steady movement into one-to-one marketing and truly getting to a place where we can engage with someone. We talked so much about the live event, but what enhances on top of it, and then what bridges in between, but creating digital experiences between brands, the team at hand, and the fan, that you can then follow them through and see what they actually do. So we've always talked a lot about what's behind social metrics, who's that audience, are we reaching the right folks? We talk a lot about measuring big TV visible assets, traditional packages, kind of everything that we've talked about to this point. Really understanding what that fan wants, and it could be delivered across a myriad of things. Getting to that one-to-one follow through and seeing what that engagement means and does, and being able to deliver that back to your partner, I think has been game changing as we sit on a brand side, trying to continue to elevate the way that they want to partner with and create long lasting relationships with the rights holders, but then also, frankly, giving you all new assets to work with and new opportunities to bring that fan in, to really understand what that engagement would look like and kind of what that long-term value of that fan is.
Close with some rapid fire.
Sure.
Start at the end and go down, and then maybe snake it back so that Kat's not always under the gun. How important is the international consumer to the future growth and health of the major U.S. sports leagues? Rapid fire.
Yes. Oh, you want more than that?
No, that's good.
Yeah, I same. I don't think it can be a either or, but absolutely a major part of the success going forward.
100%, one of the top things we get asked to work on.
Which league office does the best job of engaging fans on behalf of their sport? Can't name your own league. Tim.
Wow. Listen, this is going to be such a throwaway answer, but we all dismiss NFL because it's so big. It's like, well, other than the NFL, that's really not fair to the NFL. It is a behemoth. I mean, the fact that the NFL is as big as it is and it continues to grow and create more demand and continues to innovate, I know it's an easy answer, but I'm going NFL.
I'd give it up to Tammy Hinault at the NBA. I think she is bringing some really novel ideas and new engagement platforms, and obviously the NBA and the WNBA together are creating quite the platform for growth, and I'm just incredibly proud of them.
I agree with the NBA. I mean, they're the ones asking the next set of questions too. And where do we go from here? How do we take this even further? How do we continue to segment and truly understand and create that intimate relationship?
But I do appreciate Tim's answers.
Yeah.
What women's sports league or sport has the best shot of surpassing the top men's leagues in the world? And one reason as to why.
I mean, I still think women's soccer has so much wind at its back and incredible stories to tell, and I don't think we've seen the best of it yet.
I agree with that. I think that's right.
You know, and because they had, frankly, a couple of attempts that didn't work in their favor over the years, and now listening to Jess and Julie and the team talk about
This is the NWSL you're talking about?
NWSL, how they're just, in women's soccer, but just saying NWSL right now, but talk about how they're making their choices.
Right.
Instead of trying to show up being everything to every last fan they thought they could put into the building, they're basically saying, no, we now understand the core of what has to happen. We have limited resources, limited time. Let's get this right, and then we'll expand it out. So I think if they can keep that mindset and grow at the pace of, frankly, investment that's coming in, they'll be able to return on the key metrics and kind of keep the flywheel going. So I would agree with that. I think it's super exciting.
Hard to argue NWSL, but if I may, I'll throw in an interesting motorsports plug, and that is, I think one of the most exciting things about some of the young women that I talked about coming up in the NASCAR series is there isn't a women's league. They are going to compete in the same equipment, in the same race, on the same track with anybody else. And I think that makes the car and the track the great equalizer. And now it's just talent. So I love that idea for our sports and for our sport and motorsports as a whole, that there is just this playing field that everyone is competing equally on.
It's interesting no one said the WNBA because, I mean, I just went to McDonald's the other day down in Washington, D.C., and there's an Angel Reese meal.
Yes.
Like, she plays in Chicago. She doesn't play in Washington. So you know, in terms of, like, cutting over into the mainstream, you get a McDonald's meal and you've arrived, right? So they certainly have the stars. And we'll see where it goes. But I think we're ready to to pivot to questions from the audience? They come on the iPad? All right, let me see. I guess we're not running mics anymore like we're in 12th grade assembly. All right, where do I find these things? Okay. There's a NASCAR question that's come through. For the new female NASCAR fan, did they come to you through someone else, like a family member or a friend who is an existing fan, or is it the female drivers you think that's bringing them in, or something else?
That's a great question. I think look, the theme of a lot of this conference is data. I think we have spent a lot of time and effort and energy over the last couple of years trying to get younger. And I think most people are. How do we reach a younger fan, a new fan? And then I think what the most compelling research we have is the way that people become NASCAR fans is generational. So I think this light bulb moment was like, well, maybe we shouldn't be so desperate to find these younger fans. Maybe we should really lean into the fans that we have and empower them and enable them to become the, almost the Sherpas for these new younger fans. And if we can do that right, I think that's what's going to pay off. So I think it's a little of both. I think it's, again, I think seeing female drivers is really compelling to influence female fans. But I also think, we really like our chances from a generational standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Collaborations, last question. You've seen some sports properties show up in really interesting places, whether it's fashion or entertainment or music or film. I was watching the Oscars the other night, and the WTA was all over the red carpet. Mm-hmm. Like, just interesting collaborations. What, to close out, like, what's an interesting collaboration that you've seen that you think's made a difference for fan engagement in your own sport or in another?
Music and sport together, the crossover is amazing, especially in terms of tapping into, like, you've got multiple passions for one fan, but Loud Luxury and the NHL have had a handful of engagements over the past year, or collaborations, whether it's performing at events or, frankly, they performed at Connor McDavid's wedding. So with something like that in mind, continuing to pull that through, they've now got a fan base that athlete first, but also their fans being introduced to the rest of the NHL, and NHL fans of Connor McDavid now learning about, new EDM group or duo that they didn't know about before. So just very interesting, at sometimes talent-driven partnerships. They just happen to like each other, and it does something for the league and for the teams and so on. So just one example of groups coming together there.
Tim McCalabby-Light?
Yeah, I think that's right. Listen, I'll the convergence of entertainment and music and fashion and even stand-up comedy, I think in sports is living its best life right now. So we have a race coming up in Vegas. Morgan Freeman is going to be the grand marshal of that race. Awesome. And that was an inbound call, by the way. That was Morgan Freeman's agent saying he's a big NASCAR fan. Could he come out? And we're like, yeah, pretty sure we can make that work. But yeah, I mean, I think the other one is fashion. I think there's been a little bit of a resurgence of these throwback NASCAR jackets that have become a big thing. And so, yeah, I think any of these touch points, whether or not they are reaching scale, almost doesn't matter. I think there's some relevancy in these areas that are great for all of us.
I know the spirit of the question that you're asking, and I think that the world of convergence is the right answer. I think for me, just given the recency to the fires in LA, though you realize the ecosystem and the richness and the generosity of the partners you have. And so as the wildfires spread through LA and we finally got at least to the first step of being on the other side of it, the wealth of partners, I will shout out Michael Rubin and Fanatics in particular, who were there the minute that the communities were able to take stock of what they needed. And so, I mean, we had a dozen, like, full semis with essentials for Pasadena, for Altadena, for the Palisades, for West Hollywood. And I think that that's one of the most powerful things in sports is this, that well, for some of us stick and ball teams, like that we're grounded in a singular community. We have these tendrils every single day. And so the collaboration with the community to understand both what is needed, but then to leverage, you know, our team, our partners to be able to mobilize in that moment and have things within days to be able to bring out to those communities to start that very, very long journey back. I think for me is probably the greatest kind of recent evidence of this is why you invest in those relationships before you need them. So in these moments, you can just activate them. And I think that that's the truest spirit of collaboration in service of need.
Well, I want to thank you all for your thoughtful answers, for sharing your insights. Please, round of applause for our panel.